Ward, as well as folks in law enforcement, to trace those accounts to a fake NGO in West Africa, in Accra, Ghana. They were also operating in Nigeria. And that organization was in turn funded by the former Internet Research Agency. Just about 4 weeks ago now, there was actually an indictment of a Russian individual in connection to this West African troll farm and the funding of it. So they've gotten very creative. They've spread out their risk like any good business would. They're not just operating out of St. Petersburg anymore. They're operating out of places like West Africa. They're offshoring, if you will. You can get a lot more bang for your buck operating a troll farm out of West Africa than you can out of St. Petersburg. And trust me, it's pretty cheap just in St. Petersburg, way cheaper in West Africa to do this kind of work. And also harder to identify because this organization was fundamentally the thing it was pretending to be. This NGO was pretending to be an advocacy organization. It was only through a lot of sleuthing that we were able to tie that advocacy organization back to the Russian Internet Research Agency. And I got to say, CNN did an absolutely amazing job, as did a lot of people in the government that will never get credit for their work. And this is where it starts to get closer to the business world. A lot of trolling that happens online, Patrick and I have focused on the work coming out of Russia. And because of years of work, we're able to attribute some content to Russia, but most content you'll never be able to attribute. This account was active over the weekend. And I worked with a journalist I know well at the Washington Post to put together the network that he was a part of. And it was a story a little earlier this week about conservative Black Americans supporting Donald Trump, and 100% fake accounts. We identified 31 of them altogether. None of them lasted very long. Twitter was actually pretty active in bringing down these accounts relatively quickly. But even in their short life, you can see that they had a lot of engagement, probably because it's just the nature of their messaging. African Americans supporting President Donald Trump, that's a message that's going to spread very quickly through particular communities. While a lot of real Twitter users, not even experts, were able to see that these accounts were fake and identified them as fake on Twitter. In particular silos, those messages spread like wildfire. I saw a single tweet from one of these accounts that we identified that had over 30,000 retweets, and one account had 50,000 followers. This account, Ted Katya, had almost 20,000 followers when he was shut down. But they were purely fictional, clearly operated by people that did not have strong English skills because they kept using the same consistent message from account to account. That image is stolen from a football player in Kalamazoo from a news article about him saving a child from a fire. That gentleman's actually a hero, and he had his image stolen by someone in Eastern Europe. I believe Eastern Europe, based off of a variety of signals that would take me half an hour to try to explain, possibly Turkey. And there's some signs from this network that it was actually monetized. Most disinformation you're going to see is in one way or another monetized for financial gain and not for ideological gain. But it could also be serving more than one master at the same time. And that was very possible with these because it was another set of researchers that suggested these accounts were trying to sell Donald Trump merchandise, but I never actually saw that with my own eyes. It's possible they were doing more than one thing at the same time. If they were out of Turkey, it's a well-known fact that Erdogan would love for Donald Trump to be reelected as president for another 4 years.
Darren, I have a question about
Sure.
Twitter and Facebook reporting. Like if you report a Twitter user and say it's a fake account or whatever, is that something that, do you think that Twitter then really starts to look at it if they get enough reports versus...
If they get enough reports.
Okay.
Yes. And these were getting a lot of reports.
And then with Facebook, I feel like they don't, it seems to me like Facebook doesn't necessarily really worry about if it's fake or not. They just want to know if it's violating
Oh yeah,
their
Facebook doesn't worry
policies.
about anything.
Okay. I was
Facebook
trying to
worries
make
about
that
Facebook.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Good
I
to know.
think they probably worry about money and Facebook. Those are the
Yeah.
things that Facebook worries about.
Okay.
Twitter is marginally better. And I've actually been very supportive of, especially some decisions Twitter has been starting to make recently. But that is possibly also financially motivated. They may see certain political writing on the wall, and that may be motivating certain changes that are happening um, at
Okay.
Twitter to a great extent and Facebook to a lesser extent. So I want to talk a little more specifically, now that I've given you far too much of a background on how we've gotten to where we are, on how this really connects to the business world. And this is something I've been seeing since we first started doing this work. I saw it for the first time when we were actually approached by a billion-dollar corporation early in our work, who just, saw Patrick and I in the Washington Post. I won't tell you who, but it's a corporation that you have heard of if you have sons of between the ages of 10 and 25. And they thought they were being trolled by another corporation and asked us to prove that that wasn't the case. Disinformation is not something that is just about ideology. It, just like those accounts I just showed you who may have been creating fake accounts in order to sell products, it can be a tool that corporations leverage against one another, or that nation states leverage against corporations, such as work we did with the Wall Street Journal this time last year. So in October of last year, Daryl Morey, general manager of the Houston Rockets, had the audacity to say something positive about democracy in Hong Kong on Twitter. Now, the National Basketball Association, his employer, has the Houston Rockets are his employer, but his indirect employer is the NBA. They have a strong and growing relationship with China. More and more games are being played in China by NBA teams, and that's a relationship that's important to both the NBA and China. China couldn't let people associated with the NBA get away with the sort of free speech that is common in our country, and allow that to be associated with China, even indirectly. So after Daryl Morey said what he said about supporting democracy in Hong Kong, in the following week, 1,000 new accounts on Twitter were created every single day. And the first thing those accounts did was tweet something nasty at Daryl Morey, usually about his mother. Now, China wasn't doing that because they were actually hoping to persuade anyone. All of the real accounts in this conversation were talking in a supportive way of Daryl Morey and the demonstrations in Hong Kong. All the blue you see there is most likely real people talking in a positive way about Daryl Morey. It's the yellow that is attacking Daryl Morey. And fundamentally what China was doing there was it was about perception. And a lot of public relations and marketing is ultimately about perception. And that's the sort of disinformation that China engages in. The Chinese people are not allowed on Western platforms unless they jump a very complex firewall. So for that reason, a lot of Chinese perspective is not on Western platforms. And so if China wants it to appear that there is a Chinese perspective being voiced, sometimes they have to create it themselves. And that's what they were doing in this case, most likely. So you can see it for yourself. Visit the Twitter page of any consulate or embassy of the Chinese government. There there aren't very many genuine Chinese voices. They're apt on social media to go and retweet the consulates and embassies of the Chinese government, regardless of the information that those consulates and embassies might be sharing. And so if the Chinese government wants those Chinese voices to appear to be influential, again, they have to create that appearance from whole cloth. And so visit those embassies and consulates, and you yourself will probably in 5 minutes be able to identify someone that's retweeting them as an account that is most likely inauthentic, and created by probably a marketing firm somewhere working for the Chinese government. Have reason to believe some even Western marketing firms do this work for the Chinese government. Misinformation and disinformation is also something that not only do corporations apply in a sort of offensive way against other corporations, but it's something they do on their own behalf. So just as there's marketing firms creating fake accounts for the Chinese government or to sell product if they're Turkey, and the way that I was able to, attribute some of those accounts possibly to a connection to Turkey was that in the early history of those accounts, they were retweeting, some of them were retweeting a Turkish escort service. But I have a little bit of an anecdote from about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I had a journalist come to me saying, I think that Netflix is running a bunch of fake accounts. And so I went to take a look at it. Do you remember the movie The Bird Box on Netflix? Awful film, but it did outrageously well on Netflix. A lot of Americans watched this awful film on Netflix, starring what's her name from Speed? It's not going to come to me now, but
Sandra Bullock.
Yes, thank you. Starring Sandra Bullock.
I never saw it, so I
can't remember. I lost her name. I used to have a huge crush on her when I was in high school. Starring Sandra Bullock, did outrageously well. One reason it did so well is because it trended for several days on social media. And one reason it trended on social media was because people started making memes out of the underlying theme to the story was something having to do with you can't go outside unless you're blindfolded because monsters will eat you if they see you. I don't understand. I don't understand the theory, but that was the theory, and so people were making memes of it. But what was happening was a activity called astroturfing, where a fake account is created and puts out some memes, and then some B-level influencer or other folks on Twitter will then retweet that fake account, and it will look organic. So you have this B-level influencer with 20, 30, 40,000 followers retweet an account that didn't exist a few weeks earlier. And it looks like this memes are being generated about a movie just organically out of the ether, when really it's happening because a marketing firm is making it happen. And I found that was probably what was happening with this movie. I found a lot of brand new accounts that, a few days earlier were advertising some other product, were suddenly getting retweeted by B-level influencers. And it just so happens that my college roommate is a vice president of marketing at Netflix. And I gave him a heads up and I said, hey, college roommate, I just spoke to this well-known journalist about something I think that your company might be doing. And it was Christmas time, so he made the excuse to talk to me, to wish me a Merry Christmas. And we chatted the next day. And in the conversation, he says, isn't that fun? Isn't that funny that journalist thinks that that's what Netflix is doing? Isn't that just so funny? And I said, no, Mr. College Roommate, this is what I do now. I went and looked, and you're totally doing that thing. And he immediately changed the subject. And so this is, disinformation is the bottom line. And what I want to end with and open up for questioning is just to say that disinformation is not just about ideology. It's not just about the Russians. This, fake accounts and these same tactics are just part of our shared reality. Most accounts that you engage with are real. But, even a lot of those accounts are being manipulated at times in ways that they may not realize, in very subtle ways, by foreign actors, by corporations working on behalf of foreign actors. And it is important that we understand this when not only in our own personal lives and in our political lives, but also in our corporate lives. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Darren. Nan, you had a question. You want to go ahead and ask it?
The question was, is there a fail-safe or fairly fail-safe way of spotting a troll or the patterns of a troll? How can we understand better when we're looking at Twitter?
It's very, very difficult, given that oftentimes these are created by professionals and they know what they're doing. That was one of the main things we wanted to show in creating the Spot the Troll quiz, was just how difficult it is.
Completely.
Responses on a couple of those questions were literally a coin toss. One of the profiles on the quiz, users were more likely to answer wrong than right on one of those profiles.
Was that the guy pushing the
no, it was that also, but that was a trick question. I'm not counting that. Because he really is a troll, even though he's a real person. But no, the account using digital blackface, the young woman who is actually a Russian-made troll. People were more likely to say that she was real than fake, and she was very clearly fake.
So if you guys want to, I would love to see how many, if you took the quiz, how, I tried to do a poll and I have to go in and do the settings. So I would just love if you want to type in the chat or whatever, how you feel like you did, what you feel like, you might've learned, if you have a question about that quiz, because I'm interested. I know for me is I got a 6 out of 8. And I think I learned more after the first couple. I think I got the first 2 wrong. And then once I started reading about it, I realized, okay, that's what I need to look for.
So, Nan, the main way I've been trying to answer this question, because even if it were possible, most people don't have the time or energy to go through a checklist to decide if someone's real or fake. So the main reason I've been trying to answer that question is to say that the rules in the digital world are not any different than the rules in the real world. If you don't want if you don't want you or your company to be the victim of a phishing scam, you need to treat your life in the digital space the same that you do in the real world. So in the real world, when people go out and engage on the streets of Greenville, South Carolina, or anywhere else, that most people are harmless. Most people, that, hey, if I sat down with them, we'd probably have something in common, and they don't want to stab me or steal my money. But because they're a stranger, we still treat them differently. You don't invite someone into your home just because you think they have a nice t-shirt. You don't hand somebody your microphone just because they said something you agree with. You get to know them first. You treat strangers like strangers in the real world. And on social media, every single day, we treat strangers the same that we do as friends. And that, I think, is how disinformation spreads and misinformation spreads, by treating strangers like friends. Disinformation on social media doesn't spread unless we spread it. And we do that by having too much trust. And it's, it is important to have trust. Certainly, I think one of the biggest negative effects that disinformation has had on genuine conversations is it's an easy ad hominem to assume that someone you disagree with is a Russian troll. And that's very dangerous, I think, for real conversations, because now I can disagree with you, not just because, you and I have different lived experiences, and those different lived experiences have resulted in, different ideological beliefs. And I can disagree with you because you aren't even a real person. And then there can be no meaningful conversation. So I just think it's important that we start to treat the digital world more like the real world, that those conversations are still possible, but you still treat somebody like a stranger until you know them.
One thing that I found a little bit is on Twitter, especially, is sometimes if I find that I come across somebody who might say something about a tweet, I'll go and look at their profile and see something that they really like, or see something that they've posted about, and I'll actually ask them something that has nothing to do with what they tweeted, but just more along the lines of, oh, like one guy was just a huge Oasis fan. So I just started asking him about Oasis, and we got off the, what was making him upset about something, and just talking about that. And I feel like I was able to kind of diffuse whatever, situation was there. Another person worked on a campaign of one of our former senators. And so I, asked him about that and asked him questions about that. So felt like I was able to kind of at least have more of a personal connection in a way, and and more, it was for me to find out, is this person really who they, is this person really who they say they are as well,
Yeah, I get attacked pretty frequently on social media. Mm-hmm. Anytime a story about our work comes out, somebody will attack us because there's the relationship between disinformation and the assumption that, I must have wanted Hillary Clinton to be president then. And someone on Twitter 2 days ago said that Darren is an elitist who was born with a silver spoon up his ass for no reason to say that. I went on his account. I immediately saw he was a Hurricanes alumni, or claimed to be Miami Hurricane alumni. And so I simply responded, December 2nd, 2017, 38-3, still stings, don't it? And it changed the subject, and simultaneously also made both of us real people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I put him in his place. Let's be honest.
There you go. Yeah. You can always bring up Clemson football.
But in a way that a real person would.
That's right. Good. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Sorry, my parents love to ask questions. Jim Palmer.
Identify. So these accounts that we were identifying over the weekend that were purporting to be Black conservatives, they were clearly run by individual humans, not by a computer. There were only 30 of them, 31 of them altogether, and much harder to identify because if you are running something with a computer, you can use a computer to look for the shortcuts that a computer makes. Humans, don't make those same shortcuts. You have to look for the shortcuts that humans make, and those are much more difficult shortcuts to program a computer to identify. And then there's lots of accounts that we call cyborg accounts that are somewhere in between, that are either partially automated or and then sometimes run by a human. Troll accounts I don't love the name. I use it because that's what so many people use. Sock puppet, I think, is a more accurate name that's sometimes used for these accounts. It's just a fake account that's used by a real person. Because the term troll is often just used to describe somebody who's an ass on social media.
And they're not all jerks. They'll try to.
Oh, the professionals are very specifically not jerks.
Right.
The professionals want to be your friend, just like good marketing. I mean, the professionals rely on everything we know about persuasion and everything we know about good PR and marketing. That's what they don't try to persuade you of something you weren't already inclined to believe. There are not professional trolls out there trying to persuade Donald Trump voters to be Biden voters and vice versa. That's not a thing. They are out there trying to entrench the two sides into their side and maybe trying to persuade Biden voters or Trump voters not to show up. But that's a much lower bar than trying to persuade a Trump voter to be a Biden voter or vice versa. And that higher bar is not something that any marketing company, no matter how good, can do, especially in this day and age.
Thank you, Darren, so much. Does anybody else have any questions? If you want to unmute yourself, you're more than welcome to do so.
I just have an observation that it really, I've learned a lot in less than an hour.
I don't mean to scare people. I know that my presentation is often very scary. Again, most accounts are real. The sad thing is just that the professional accounts are much better at this than we are.
Glenda, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question about, so what is the end goal? Is it, I'm assuming they're getting money, right? They're looking for donation money, or what is the end goal? I mean, misinformation, you can't really get money off of misinformation, I guess.
Oh, sure you can. Oh, you can definitely get money out of misinformation.
Oh, okay.
Just look at the work of Alex Jones or Mike the Health Ranger. Alex Jones is all about misinformation. It's because misinformation is salacious, and a certain percentage of the population is going to repeat that salaciousness. I mean, just in the same way that, cash register tabloids are misinformation, they're a form of misinformation that people are going to buy. So, I mean, I think that a lot of the misinformation that you see out there is created in America. It's not created by the Russians. It's created by America by people like Alex Jones, who are trying to sell vitamins. Or the main thing Alex Jones was selling at the beginning of the pandemic was buckets of survivalist food, because the pandemic was going to destroy civilization, and he was preaching that the pandemic was going to destroy civilization. That is, and his various arguments for that were fundamentally misinformation that he was making money off of. But your broader question, Glenda, I think is not really answerable, because it just depends on the actor. A misinformation provider like Alex Jones has clear financial motivation. The motivation of China versus Iran versus Russia is all going to be very different. I think, the misinformation out of Russia, for instance, is there a motivation to support Trump? Seemingly, yes, that motivation is there. But I think that their more primary motivation is simply to distract us. The more that we're talking about what's happening in Seattle or what's happening in Milwaukee, the less we're talking about what's happening in the Ukraine, the less we're talking about Putin poisoning his adversaries in Russia. And a strong democracy should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. It is very important that we talk about what's happening in the streets of Seattle, but a strong democracy that has its together should be able to do that and talk about the Ukraine at the same time. And Putin wants to make sure that we can't do that. Whereas China just wants to look powerful and look influential. And so their disinformation is more about that. they both want a free hand, and they have different means to go about that. So, what is someone trying to get out of something? It just depends ultimately on the actor.
Is there a place where you and Patrick are able to share your findings regarding, do you have like a website where we can see, what you guys are doing and how you're able to share your findings on trolls on social media?
Yeah, we have a website at the Media Forensics Hub. I don't remember the actual URL now, but if you just Google Clemson Media Forensics Hub, you'll find what we're doing with students at Clemson right now, and some of our research. There's a lot of our research we made available on the resources page of the Spot the Troll Hub, or Spot Troll quiz, as well as the research and writing done by a lot of other people. That's more approachable than a lot of the research we provide on the Media Forensics Hub website, which tends to be a little more academic. The Spot the Troll quiz content is more mainstream.
And I did put that that into the chat, the URL for the Spot the Troll quiz. I can also send it to everybody. I don't know if everybody was able to get the automatic updates that if you didn't receive an email after you registered, just let me know. That's just a little thing. So, but yeah, just to kind of keep everybody aware and respectful of your time. I'm happy to take one more question, and then we can go. Kate Palmer. Yes.
Darren, what about the QAnon phenomenon?
Yeah, I saw your question there, and I wanted to respond to that one. I am sure that there are some fake accounts circulating in the QAnon world, but the vast majority of those are real, and terrifying to me. The degree to which that conspiracy has taken hold, because it's absurd on its face, and some of the things that these conspiracy theorists profess are just outrageous and absurd, and have been just like they need to be disproven, have been disproven time and time again. But it's very much cult-like. I don't think that there are many people who truly believe the underlying arguments made by QAnon, which, if you don't know, the underlying argument of QAnon is that pedophiles control the deep state American government as well as the global economy, and they periodically take the blood of virgin children for their own satanic rituals. That's not
11
at all.
o'clock.
Yeah, it's not even a little bit of an exaggeration, and if anything, that's underselling how absurd QAnon is. And while yes, pedophiles are a thing and dangerous, they aren't selling children on the Wayfair website like QAnon suggests they are, in cabinets. But I don't think that there are as many people who honestly believe it as perception may dictate. But because of how interconnected those accounts are, they can be outsized influential on social media. Facebook and Twitter have clamped down on them to some extent in the past few months, with some success. But as I told the Washington Post, Twitter used a scalpel, not a chainsaw, and they probably should have used a chainsaw, because there's 90,000 accounts still on Twitter that have QAnon hashtags in their profile, which is too many. But still, there's 360 million Americans. 90,000 is a pretty small number in the grand scheme of things. Too many, but hopefully we'll be able to keep them under control.
Well, thank you so much, Darren Linville, and this was amazing. I've learned so much, and just want to give everybody a shout out for coming today. Appreciate it. If you have any further questions or anything, you can email me, and I'd be happy to forward that to Dr. Linville and see if he can answer. But anyways, just have a great rest of the day. And
thanks, everybody.
We appreciate you all. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.